Good morning, everybody. Okay, we are 35B at the bottom, 4 lines from the bottom. And now we're switching to a new topic. Amar Mavo. So the Mishnah had discussed combining different categories of forbidden things to make one shiur. Obviously, there's always a minimum forbidden amount, and if you mix two different things to come up with that minimum, what happens? Ravo says, "Kol Yisur Shabbat ein heter mitzaref liYisur." For all of the forbidden things in the Torah, if you we'll discuss a kazayis, right, and olive size as a typical measure for a minimum. What if you have a grape sandwich? Okay, so there's not a minimum amount of grape, but the entire sandwich is, including the bread, just as an example, comes up to the minimum or exceeds the minimum. So in general, we do not say that happens. We don't say that the permissible food combines with the forbidden food to make a minimum. Foods may store Nazir, except for Nazir. Shari Amar Torah, because the Torah says Mishras Anavim. One of the things that's forbidden is something soaked in grapes. So if you take your bread and you soak it in grape juice, right, then the Torah is specifically saying that soaked thing is forbidden, and so the bread part of it is now part of what you measure. Ziri Amar, and Ziri says, adds another one, Af Saor Bal Taktir. When the Torah says don't burn chametz, which is saor is commonly translated as sourdough, like the sourdough starter, but you can't have chametz on the altar. So he includes that as if the starter is mixed with permissible stuff, then it all becomes, one big thing of chametz, and you measure the entire thing. Come on, now who is Zeiri? In accordance with Krabelazar, the Darish call, because when the Torah says don't put saor on the altar, it says ki kol saor b'chol dvash lo saktiru, all saor. So Rabbi Lazar says that it specifies that the use of that word kol, every or any, it comes to tell us that the combined mixture is what you measure. So if that's the case, what about eating chametz? The Torah says don't eat any chametz, right? So then we should say the same thing, that if chametz is mixed with a permissible food item on Pesach, it should be combined to one shiur. If you're going to base it on the word kol. And the Gemara says, yes, you're right. That's another example according to Zeiri. Chametz on Pesach. Why did he tell us about the chametz on the mizbeach? Because he specifically wants to distance himself from Abaye. Abaye says that you don't even need a kazayis to be forbidden from putting on the altar. It's not that there's a combination rule, it's that you don't even need the minimum, right? There's a smaller minimum, I guess it's a mashahu, right? That any amount of chametz on the mizbeach is forbidden. You don't have to worry about combining it. So Ziri says, no, that's not the case. I don't agree with Abaye. There does have to be a minimum, but to achieve that minimum, you can consider what the starter is mixed with. And so that's why he specified, and indeed, eating chametz on Pesach, the same rule, right? But Abaye doesn't argue about that, right? So he specifically spoke about the starter on the altar in order to distance himself from Abaye, who says that there is no minimum.
Go ahead.
So what Ziri is telling us is that if it's less than the kazayis on the altar, that's not even called haktara, however you translate that, sacrificing or burning. That's not even considered. You don't even need to consider that if it's less than the kazayis. Yes, Charlie.
So my question: there's one thing to have commit enough of a sin to be liable for lashes or a korban, but don't we generally follow the rule that Hatzi Shiratz or Minhag Torah, and any
Mhm.
amount is going to be forbidden uh, to be consumed or offered in
Yeah,
the altar? Or,
I believe you're correct. So, so I guess we would understand that they're talking about here a punishable offense, right? And so, according to Abaye, even a tiny amount, burning a tiny amount of chametz on the altar, it would be a punishable offense. That's chiddush, right? That's unusual, and that's why Zairi disagrees, right? It doesn't say here what Abaye's reasoning or what his source is. I suppose that's addressed elsewhere in the Gemara, where this topic is discussed.
okay.
Yesterday, Rodimi was recounting this sugya, this discussion. Esrei Abai, so Abai asked him as follows: Hamikpa shel truma. Brisa says if you have a mikpa, which is like a porridge, okay, and if it's composed of truma, of grain from truma, vashum vashem and shalchuin, but you put in other things in porridge. You put in some oil, you put in some garlic, and those are not truma. All right. V'naga tvuliyam b'miktsasa. Now, somebody who's tameh, and we're specifically referring to a tevul yom, someone who has already gone to the mikveh. He just needs to wait till nightfall till he becomes tahar. So he touches, he dips a spoon in one edge of the pot, right, and takes out some. Um, so pasal is cooling. So the whole pot it becomes tummy. Meaning, the reason I think we're dealing with the tavul yom is that he can disqualify truma, but he doesn't make other things like well, I'm not sure about that, but yeah, but look, truma that becomes tame, you're not allowed to eat, right? It's disqualified. So this person touches a truma mixture, then it is disqualified, becomes tame. Mikvah shel chulin, but what if the main body of the porridge is chulin? It's not truma. Vashum vashemen shel truma, and the additives, the oil, the garlic, those are truma. V'nagos fuyom miktsasa, and the same thing happened. Lo pasal makom mago. Then what you can do is you can scoop out the area from which he touched, right? And the rest of it, is okay. So in other words, so it seems to be happening is that we're concerned about the bit of oil and garlic within the mixture, but that doesn't pervade the whole pot. So anything that was touched, becomes tame. So you take that part out, and the rest of the mixture is fine, which is not the case if the whole thing is truma and only a little bit of chulin. Vavina, so we discussed it. Makomago my puzzle. Why is the place where he touched? Why is that disqualified? Like if the whole thing is considered chulin, right? Then why are we concerned about it? Matam, what's the reason? Hov is our local because if somebody were to eat from it, then he would be subject to lashes if he ate a kazayas. Okay, my tame, and what's the reason for that? Right? It's like so. Now we get into the mixture thing. If you eat exactly kazayas and some of it, a little bit of the ingredients is not truma, right? So then the actual truma stuff that you ate is less than the kazayas, right? So lav mishum deheter mitzarf liser. So we see from here, don't we see from here that the heter mitzarf liser, right? That you consider the whole thing as one mixture, and the permitted stuff, the chulin part of it, combines with the truma, and the whole thing is considered as truma, right? So doesn't that contradict what Rabbi Yochanan said earlier, that ein heter mitzarf lis, that the heter mitzarf lis only applies to Nazir? Here it appears to apply to truma as well. But Rav Dimi answered him, no, not so. My kazayis, what does he mean that the person is liable for eating the kazayis? Dika kazayis b'chtei achila pras. There's a different thing. Is there how much truma is in the mixture? So kedei achilas pras is a measure of what a person eats in the time it takes to eat a loaf of bread or a serving of bread, right? Is there a kazayis of truma in that measure of the food? So then eating, so then if you were to eat achilas pras, if you eat the size of a loaf of bread or whatever pras means, if you were to eat that much, then there would be a kazayis of truma within it. So that's when you get that's what it means when you get the lashes. Okay, that you ate enough of it so that you ate a kazayis of truma ingredients. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm stumbling over my words a little here. So it's not what we thought, that you just eat a kazayis of the mixture. It means you eat enough of the mixture that you ate a kazayis of truma ingredients within what you ate. Okay, so now, but the Gemara asks, "Achilas pras d'oraisa." What is that? Is that a biblical law measure? Usually we just go with kazayis. Amalein. Radimi says yes, it is. That is a biblical measure. You want to tell me that kedei achilas pras is a biblical measure? I'll bring you another case. Kutach habavli. So that's this kind of mixture of cheese or whey or with some kind of bread. So Rabbi Lazar, so that would be something that is a mixture that on Pesach, Rabbi Lazar would say from the word kol machmetzos lo tochelu, from all chametz you shouldn't eat. You wouldn't be able to eat this mixture, but the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Lazar, and they say that that this mixture is not a biblically forbidden thing on Pesach. So why do they say that, right? If it's true that a kazayis b'chdei achilas pras, that that you consider the ingredients, the measure of the ingredients within the mixture, then the rabbis should say, if there's a kazayis of chametz in the mixture that you ate, then you are liable on Pesach. So he answers, no, let's not talk about kutach habavli. It's a separate thing. The leka kazayis b'chdei achilas pras, because there isn't so much bread in there, right? It's just a sprinkling of breadcrumbs. So you don't have that much. You don't have a kazayis in the portion that a person eats. If you eat kutach habavli, you're not going to be eating that much chametz. So that's not a good example. Eat a kasarifle misraf. So and what if you eat more than kedei achilas pras? Like what if you eat like the whole pot full? So batladato etzel kol adam. So that's like no, okay. This is the kutach habavli was generally eaten as a dip, right? So a person, you wouldn't eat that much of it. I remember one time when I was a kid, I went to a wedding, and they had on the tables, they had like this kind of sculpted margarine. It was, and I didn't know what it was. It didn't look to me like margarine. It looked like something like an appetizer. So I started eating like the straight margarine. So that is abnormal, right? Margarine is meant to be spread on your bread. Okay. If some idiot kid like me goes ahead and eats the whole plate of margarine, then that's considered abnormal, and that's not a normal eating. Right, so that wouldn't even be considered eating if you eat the kutach habavli straight out of the jar, or straight out of the pot. So because the normal amount of chametz in a serving of kutach habavli is less than the kazayis, that's why the rabbis say you're off the hook, right? And what if you eat a whole kazayis of kutach habavli? You're still off the hook, because that's abnormal. That's not a normal person's way of eating. And if you just dip it, if you're dipping it like a normal person, then you won't have that much chametz. It'll be less than the kazayis. Okay. Esvei. So Abaye asks the following: Shnei medochos. If you have two mortars, achos shel truma v'achos shel chulin. One, so one bowl of truma, one of chulin. L'falav shnei kderos, and you have two pots that you're going to cook in. Achos shel truma v'achos shel chulin. One is truma and one is chulin. V'naflu elu l'tech elu. So, one of the truma spices. Let's talk about spices because we're talking about mortars, right? So you've ground up some pepper, and one of the pepper bowls gets poured into one of the pots, and the other one gets poured into the other pot. You don't know, did truma go into truma or did truma go into chulin? Shtei mutaros. So we say both are permitted. Shani Omer, because I can impose this reality, I think is what we're saying, or I can impose this on reality. I'll say, you know what? I'm going to consider it as if the chulin went into the chulin, the truma truma nafla, and the truma went into the truma. V'isal katata bichdei achilas because I bichdei achilas prastoraisa. Amai Amrina and Shani Omer. Why do you even have to go there? Why do you even have to say that I'm going to consider it as if, like I'm going to impose this version of events on reality? You don't even need that. What if the chulin went into the truma? It's still just, a little pepper in a big pot of soup, right? It's not, there's less than a kazayas of pepper in a bowl of soup. So why do you even need to go there to say that? Like even you could even say that the chulin went into the truma went into the chulin, but it's not a problem if the truma went into the chulin because it's only a little bit. Elamai. So Dimi answers. So okay. So what are you going to say then? Heter mitzaref liiser. So you're going to say that. So like your view is that you can combine heter and iser to make one minimum. So you still have the same question, right? Like you're saying, you're trying to argue with me by saying, what do you need the shani omer? What do you need to assume what happened? But you have to do the same thing because heter mitzaref liiser, according to you. If the person ate exactly kazayis of the soup, then the of the truma soup, then the forbidden pepper would or the other way around, whatever. But if you ate exactly a kazayis, the permitted ingredient part would be included in the kazayis, and you would be liable. Ella, so how do I answer? You know what? The whole problem here of spices going into a pot is not a problem biblically. It's only a rabbinic problem because spices, according to me, is just a drabanan when it comes to truma. So it's only a rabbinic injunction, and biblically, it's not even considered. Spices are not. You don't have truma in the case of spices. Esvei, we'll bring another case. Shtei kupos. You have two boxes. Achos shel truma v'achos shel chulin. One is truma and one is not. V'snein shtei sein. This is a similar case. You have two what's the saw, like a larger container with grain. Achos shel chulin v'achos shel truma. One is truma and one is not. V'naflu elu tochelu. And you poured one box into one bin and the other box into the other bin. So the same kind of thing, except now we're not talking about spices. We're talking about grain. Shnei and mutarin. You say that everything is okay. So it's a similar case, but now we don't have the dodge of saying that it's only the Rabbanan additive. Same question. So according to Abaye, so I say that the problem with the Kohen and the case of the porridge, right, with a little bit of truma mixed in it. So I say that's because heter mitzaref leisur. Kagon to nefishe chulin. So in a case where there's more chulin than truma, then I could like there's no combination issue of heter and iser because there's so little truma involved. But you have a different measure, right? Your measure is that in the case of the porridge, that there's a kazayis of truma or of tame truma within the one serving of porridge. My havi. What do you care if there's more? Like in this case, if there's more chulin than truma, it's like. So Amalei Halachu Truma B'Zman Zed Rabbanan. Rav Dimi says I could still say it's Rabbanan because it's Truma. Today I can say is not in the time of the temple, is only rabbinic, and so I can dodge your question that way.
So that's going to be two derabanans. First of all, a mixture of truma and chulin is will be bito baro if there's more biblically if there's more chulin than truma, because the 1 in 100 is a rabbinic stringency, and if you accept that truma is only rabbinic today, you've got a double derabanan.
Wait, what's the 1 in 100 talking about? I'm not following.
Well, truma is bittul in a mixture of 1 in 100.
Oh, okay, yes.
As long as it's an accident, this is clearly discussing an accident.
Right. Interesting. I didn't think about that.
You've got a double derabanan, so why would there be that? There's a general principle that a double question is not going to be worried about.
Okay, it's a good question. I'm feeling like the 1 in 100 thing. What's the nature of that measure?
If you actually drop an ounce of truma into 100 ounces of chulin, it's bittul.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like 1/60th for.
Right. But maybe so we're talking about less than that, or I should say more than that, like
yes,
the larger.
But that's by rabbinic. By biblical law, if you have 5 ounces of chulin and 4 ounces of truma, that's bittul. All these things are that
that's kind of discussing here, right?
Or bittul baro biblically.
Right. Well, we're trying. That's what we're discussing. Like, in what case is it? Yeah. Right. Then we have different views. Is heter mitzvah isur? Is it because I speak less pras? Right. There's these different measures that we're trying to determine. And Rav Dimi says, you know what? In the case you're talking about, you're trying to bring me a proof from this brisa. You're talking about modern day truma, which is only draban in the first place. So that's why we can be lenient about it.
Right, so we're concerned about the amount of truma, not the rest of the mixture in this case, aren't we?
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're talking about two things.
According to Abaye, we are. According to Rav Dimi, it is a question of the amount in the mixture, because his measure is how much is there in one serving? How much truma is in one serving of the porridge?
But that doesn't take into account bittul, because you can have.
What I'm surmising is that we're talking about greater proportions than what would qualify as bittul.
Right, but biblically, it's bittul with a majority of chulin, which is very easy to get. That's probably why the rabbis were very stringent about this.
But isn't that what we're discussing? Like, if it's heter mitzvah fleece, or I see what you're saying, but well, just give me a second here. Let me think. So you're saying that biblically, it's just a question of rov, but that doesn't
practically everything is bittul baro biblically. We don't hold that way in practice, but that would affect whether you'd be chayav a korban.
Yeah, that does seem kind of contrary to the whole discussion, which is different proportions.
Maybe they'll come to that conclusion later on. But the other thing about truma being rabbinic, that is actually an unresolved controversy in the Gemaras, in the Yushalmis in Seder Zerayan. They never come to a conclusion about that, and they admit the possibility throughout that it is that truma is biblical even today.
Mhm.
I think most of the Rishonim don't hold that position, but the Yerushalmi Truma does not absolutely assume that. And similarly, Maestro and so forth.
Yeah.
In fact,
Interesting.
there's even a
I was talking to I guess Rav Bigman, who from Israel, who deals with a lot of personal status issues these days, and of people in Israel. And he was talking about, a Kohen that wants to marry, whether it's a divorcee or a ger or whatever, and he says, like, these problems are not really that hard to solve because it's all rabbinic. Like the status of a Kohen is all just kind of traditional. It's not.
Right.
It's not at all confirmed. So these are the easy problems to deal with.
Yeah, if we ever get the temple back in our lifetimes, we'll actually have to worry about who really is a Kohen.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's not a big
Different.
if you accidentally giving someone who's not a Kohen the first aliyah, you haven't really caused a humongous problem.
Yeah. Okay, we'll stop here for today.
Thank you. Yasher Koach.
See you
Thank
next time.
you.